I found a hidden room in my house. You won't believe what was inside. It started with a draft, a cold breath of air that whispered through my bedroom at night, sending chills up my spine. At first, I thought it was just poor insulation. This house was old, after all. But then, one evening, as I rearranged my bookshelf, I felt it again. Stronger, colder. I pressed my hands against the wall. It felt hollow. My heart pounded as I knocked. Thump, thump, a different sound than the other walls. I traced my fingers along the edges of the wallpaper, searching, until my fingernail caught on something. A seam. With a deep breath, I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and carefully slid it along the seam. The wallpaper peeled back like an old secret, revealing a narrow outline of a door I had never seen before. Adrenaline surged through me as I fumbled around, looking for a handle. There was none, just a faint circular indentation. I pressed my palm against it. Click. The door swung open into darkness. A heavy, musty scent filled my nose like dust and time itself had been trapped inside. I grabbed my phone and shined the flashlight inside. The room was small, barely the size of a walk-in closet, with stone walls covered in strange, unfamiliar symbols. In the center stood a single wooden chair, and on it sat an old, leather-bound book. I stepped inside, feeling the temperature drop around me. My breath came out in a thin mist. I reached for the book, my fingers trembling as I brushed away the dust. The cover had a single word, embossed in gold. Do not open. I should have listened. But curiosity won. My hands moved before my brain could stop them, and I flipped open the first page. The words were written in deep red ink. At least, I told myself it was ink. To the one who reads this, know that you have already been seen. A shiver ran down my spine. I turned the page. More writing, but this time, the letters shifted, changed, rearranged themselves before my eyes. Turn around. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, heart pounding, I turned. The chair was empty. But the book? The book was gone from my hands. It now rested on the seat, open, the pages flipping on their own. Then I heard it. A whisper, right behind me. You shouldn't have come here. The lights in my house flickered. A cold gust slammed the hidden door shut behind me, and the whisper turned into a laugh that was not my own. I stood frozen, my pulse racing. The laughter echoed around the room, bouncing off the cold stone walls. It wasn't just a laugh. It was like the sound of 1,000 voices, layered on top of each other, speaking a language I couldn't understand. I took a step back, my mind screaming at me to run. But the door behind me was sealed tight, the air thick and suffocating. I could barely breathe. I looked down at the book again, its pages still flipping as if someone or something was controlling it. You can't leave, the voice whispered again, this time closer, much closer. I whipped around, half expecting to see a shadowy figure standing behind me. But there was nothing. Just the empty chair, the eerie symbols on the walls, and the unsettling draft. My phone's flashlight flickered and dimmed, casting long, menacing shadows across the room. I took another step back, my fingers instinctively reaching for the handle of the door. It wouldn't budge. It was like the room itself was closing in on me, as if it had a mind of its own. It's too late, the voice said, this time clearer. You've unlocked it. You've awoken it. I glanced down at the book again, my hands trembling. The words on the page were shifting faster now, changing into something more alive. Each letter seemed to have a pulse, a rhythm, like they were breathing. You have no choice now. The voice continued, growing darker. You've opened the door to the past, and now the past will claim you. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further. My breath turned into a visible cloud of vapor, and I could see the tips of my fingers starting to turn pale. The ground beneath me seemed to tremble slightly, like something ancient and powerful was stirring deep beneath the floor. I turned again, looking for any escape, any way out of this nightmare. That's when I saw it. The walls of the room were shifting too. The symbols etched into the stone weren't just static, they were moving, crawling like they had a life of their own. Crack! I gasped as the floorboards beneath my feet split apart. The room seemed to be coming alive, twisting and warping, growing in size, stretching outward like a living organism. The chair, which had been stationary just moments before, was now spinning slowly in place, its legs creaking with every turn. "We are watching," the voice hissed, sending a chill down my spine. And we always watch. Panic surged through me. I backed away from the chair, my foot catching on something behind me. I looked down. There, at the edge of the room, was a small, hidden trapdoor that I hadn't noticed before. The symbols on the floor seemed to be pointing directly at it. My body acted on instinct. I reached for the trapdoor, prying it open with shaking hands. Inside was a narrow passageway, the dark unknown stretching out before me. Without thinking, I crawled into it, pushing myself forward, the eerie sounds of the room above me growing more distant. The air down here was damp, thick with mildew, and the walls seemed to press in on me. Then, just as I thought I had escaped, a soft glow appeared at the far end of the tunnel. It grew brighter, almost inviting, and I found myself crawling toward it, against every rational instinct I had. I wasn't in control anymore. Something else was pulling me toward it. When I reached the light, I stood up and found myself in a large underground chamber. The walls here were lined with shelves filled with hundreds of old, dusty books and strange artifacts. But there was something more disturbing about this room. In the center of the room stood a large mirror, a mirror that reflected nothing. No light, no shadows, just an empty black void. I stared at it for a moment, confused and mesmerized by its emptiness. My heart skipped a beat when I saw something in the reflection that wasn't there in the room with me. A figure. It was standing behind me. Tall, shadowed, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare directly into my soul. I turned quickly. Nothing. But the voice, that same voice from before, whispered once more in my ear, "You are already ours." And that was when I realized this room, this house, had been waiting for me. I wasn't supposed to find it. But now that I wasn't sure I could ever leave. I backed away from the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt heavier now, thick with an oppressive energy that pressed against my skin, making it hard to breathe. My thoughts raced, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of what was happening. The voice. That voice was everywhere now. It wasn't just in my ears anymore. It was in my head, in my thoughts, weaving itself into every corner of my mind, like it had always been there, waiting for the right moment to speak. "Do you see it now?" The voice whispered, soft and slow. "Do you understand?" I glanced back at the mirror. The figure was still there, standing perfectly still, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. I could feel its presence, like it was inside the reflection, yet outside it at the same time. It felt like a trap, an invitation to step closer, but every instinct screamed for me to run. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. The figure was pulling me in, like it had a magnetic force that kept my gaze fixed. I could feel my body moving toward the mirror, my legs carrying me without my permission. It was as if something was controlling me, overriding every rational thought in my brain. My hands reached out, fingers trembling as they touched the cold surface of the mirror. "No!" I wanted to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the silence. My reflection began to distort, the edges warping into something unrecognizable. The air around me crackled with energy. The room felt alive, as though it were breathing with me, expanding and contracting with every breath I took. Suddenly, the figure in the mirror stepped forward. My heart stopped. I stumbled back, but my feet felt as if they were stuck to the floor, weighed down by something invisible. The figure's eyes, those hollow eyes, bore into me, unblinking, unfeeling. It was a creature, but not of flesh. It was pure darkness, a void that couldn't exist in the real world, but somehow did. It reached out, its hand sliding through the glass like it was liquid. The moment it touched me, a shock of cold rushed through my body. I felt the mirror's surface begin to ripple beneath my skin, as if the reflection was no longer just a reflection, but a portal. "You've opened the door," the voice growled, "and now you will stay." I tried to scream, tried to pull away, but the presence in the mirror was dragging me in. I could feel myself being pulled toward it, my body fighting against the invisible force, but my legs felt like lead. The more I struggled, the stronger the pull became until I could feel the surface of the mirror pressing against my skin. In a desperate move, I reached into my pocket for my phone, hoping the light would break whatever hold the mirror had on me. I pointed the flashlight at the mirror, watching the light reflect off the surface. But the light didn't do what I expected. It disappeared, as if the mirror had swallowed it whole. A cold laugh echoed from the depths of the room. The figure's face twisted into a grotesque smile, its eyes glowing brighter, more hollow. "You can't escape," it whispered. "You are already part of this place. This house, this curse, is yours now." In that moment, I realized what was happening. The house had been built on this very room, on the twisted history it held, feeding on those who came too close. It had been waiting for me, and now I was bound to it, locked in a loop that would never end. With one last surge of panic, I yanked my hand away from the mirror, ripping myself out of the pull just enough to stagger back. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to escape. But there was nothing. There was no way out. I turned to face the door, the only way back. But the passage was gone. The tunnel I had crawled through, the hidden room, the secret door, everything had vanished. The walls were solid once again, the shelves stacked with books and artifacts now just decoration, a facade of normalcy. I ran to the other side of the room, desperately searching for an exit. But the mirror, it wasn't just a mirror anymore. It had become a window, a dark, swirling abyss that seemed to reach beyond the space I knew. The voice spoke again, louder now, reverberating through my bones. "You've become part of the story. There is no escaping what you found. It will follow you. It will never let you go." The mirror began to shimmer, and I saw something horrifying. I saw my own face, but not in the way I knew it. It was distorted, twisted, like a reflection of what I could become. A hollow shell, a prisoner of the house's curse. And as I stood there, staring into my own doomed reflection, I understood. The house didn't just trap the body, it trapped the soul. And now I was part of it. The house would always find me. It would always call me back. I tried to run, to escape. But as I turned toward the door that no longer existed, the last thing I saw in the mirror was the same figure from before, its hands outstretched, ready to pull me back into the darkness. And then everything went black. The darkness swallowed me whole, and for what felt like an eternity, I was suspended in nothingness. No sound, no light, no sense of time or place. It was as though I had been pulled into the very heart of the house, deep into its void, where the rules of reality no longer applied. Then, suddenly, a faint light flickered, like a distant star. Slowly, it grew brighter, until I could make out the edges of a familiar shape. The mirror. But it wasn't the same mirror. This one was cracked, its edges jagged like the shards of a broken dream. I reached out, but my hand passed right through it, as though the mirror was not made of glass, but something more fluid, like water. I tried to step forward, but I couldn't move. My body felt strange, heavy and cold. I looked down, and my hands were pale, translucent, like they no longer belonged to me. A growing realization hit me like a wave. I wasn't in my body anymore. "No," I screamed, though my voice didn't sound like mine. It was distant, hollow, as if it was coming from far away. What's happening to me? The voice that had tormented me for so long answered, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was calm, almost soothing, as if it were explaining something I should have already known. You are no longer part of the world you knew, it said. You are part of the house now. Part of the story it weaves. Part of the curse that binds it. I felt my mind splinter, the edges of my thoughts fracturing. I tried to hold on to what was left of my sanity, but it was slipping through my fingers like sand. No, I said again, my voice wavering. I won't stay here. I won't be a part of this. But the voice didn't reply. Instead, I felt a strange pull, a force that gently tugged me toward the broken mirror. It was as if the mirror was calling me, beckoning me to step through it, into whatever lay beyond. I hesitated. My instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness around me was all-encompassing, pressing in from every direction. The mirror seemed like the only way forward, the only way to understand what had happened to me. With a final, desperate breath, I reached for the shattered edges, my fingers brushing against the cold surface. The instant my hand made contact, everything shifted. The ground beneath me trembled. The room around me stretched and warped, folding in on itself like a book with its pages torn out. The mirror cracked wider, its shards swirling around me like a vortex, and before I could process what was happening, I was pulled inside. I fell. Down. Through the mirror. Into the abyss. I opened my eyes. I was no longer in the chamber. I wasn't even in the house. The air was thick, damp with a strange, heavy humidity. The ground was soft beneath my feet, like wet clay. But the most terrifying part was what I saw around me. The world was wrong. The sky above was an inky black, swirling with endless clouds. There were no stars, no sun. The trees around me were twisted, their branches gnarled and reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was heavy with a dense fog, obscuring everything but the outlines of the twisted forest that seemed to stretch on forever. In the distance, I saw something move. At first, I thought it was a shadow, but then it became clearer. It was a figure, a person, walking slowly toward me. Their face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel their gaze, even from a distance. It was the same feeling I had gotten when I first stepped into the hidden room, the sensation that someone, or something, was always watching. And then, the voice returned. "Welcome," it whispered, sending a chill through me. "You've finally arrived. We've been waiting." I turned around, expecting to see the mirror again, but it was gone. In its place was the figure standing before me, their face still hidden in darkness. They reached out, their hands stretching toward me, but I couldn't move. "You are now part of this place," the voice continued, now coming from all directions, surrounding me. "Part of the story, and now you will never leave." The figure took another step closer. I could feel the pull again, the same compulsion to move, to approach them, even though every part of me screamed to run. But I couldn't. It was as if the air itself had a weight to it, holding me in place. "The house will always find you," the voice said. "You will never escape it. It is a part of you now, and you are part of it." The figure stepped closer still. I could almost make out their face now, just barely, but it wasn't human. It was wrong. Its eyes were wide and empty, just like the figure in the mirror. Its lips were stretched into a grotesque, unnatural smile. "We have been waiting for someone like you," it said, its voice a cold, hollow echo. "Someone who would unlock the door. Someone who would open the way." I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. But all I could do was stare into its hollow eyes as it took the final step toward me. "Now," it whispered, "you are part of the house, and the house is part of you." And with that, I was pulled into the darkness once again. I couldn't breathe. My heart thudded in my chest, too loud, too fast. Every inch of my body screamed for escape, yet I felt trapped, as though the air itself was thick with chains. The figure's face grew clearer, its eyes now piercing straight through me, hollow and endless. "You will never be free," the voice repeated, its tone almost soothing now. "You are already one with the house. It has claimed you, and you have claimed it." I tried to move, to break free from the invisible weight pulling me forward, but my limbs were frozen, my body unwilling to obey. My mind raced, but I couldn't grasp anything. Nothing made sense anymore. The ground beneath me was shifting, its dark, muddy surface swirling, almost alive. The air tasted bitter, as though it was soaked with the memories of everyone who had come before me, lost to this place. Suddenly, the figure stepped closer. So close now, I could feel its breath on my face, cold and ancient like a tomb. Its hand reached toward me, and I couldn't look away. Despite my instincts, my body wanted to reach out to it, to embrace whatever terrible force it represented. "It's too late for resistance," it whispered, its voice a soft caress now. "You are one with us. You are part of the house, part of the story. There is no escaping." With trembling hands, I reached out involuntarily, my fingers brushing the cold, hollow ones of the figure. The moment our skin touched, a jolt of freezing electricity shot through my body, and I gasped, not in pain, but in understanding. I saw it. The house. The history. The endless cycle of souls lost to it. The figure smiled, its face warping into something worse. The eyes, the same hollow eyes from the mirror, began to glow, and they were not empty anymore. They were filled with something ancient, terrifying, and alive. "Do you see now?" it whispered. Suddenly I was falling, not through the air, not through the ground, but through time itself. The forest around me melted away, replaced by images flashing too quickly for me to grasp. I saw faces, so many faces. People from the past, all of them lost, all of them trapped here in the same endless cycle. A flash of my own face, distorted and broken, appeared before me. I saw myself, not as I was, but as I was meant to be. A shadow, a whisper, a part of the house, part of the curse. I tried to scream again, but my mouth was dry. I couldn't scream anymore. I could only understand. It was too late. The cycle was real. This house had been built not just with stone and wood, but with the souls of those it had claimed, those who wandered too close, those who sought what they shouldn't have. Each one was part of its story, woven into the walls, into the air, into the very essence of the house. Each one, including me, was bound to it forever. I blinked, and suddenly, the world around me shifted again. I was standing in the house, my house again. The walls were the same, the familiar rooms that I had once thought safe. But there was something different, a suffocating weight in the air. It was silent, too silent. And then I realized the house was watching me. Not just the walls or the rooms. Every inch of it was alive, sentient, aware of my every move. I was no longer just trapped within it. I was now its keeper. The voice returned, calm and unrelenting. "You will watch. You will wait. And when the time comes, you will guide others to us." I felt a sudden pull, as if my very being was being drawn back into the depths of the house. I wanted to resist, but there was no point. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't escape. "It's time," the voice whispered. "Your story has only just begun." And then I knew. I was not just a prisoner of this house. I was now a part of it. An extension of the curse, one that would never end. The house was more than just a place. It was a living entity, feeding on the souls of those who came too close. And now, my soul, my very essence, was bound to it forever. As I turned, I saw the first of many figures approaching. They were drawn to the house, to the stories, to the endless pull. The cycle would continue just as it always had. The house would never stop, never rest, always searching for the next soul to claim. And I would always be there, waiting, watching, guiding for the house. The figures kept coming, each one drawn like moths to a flame, unknowingly stepping closer to the house's insidious pull. I stood at the threshold, observing them, knowing exactly what awaited them. The cycle had begun again, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The first of the new arrivals stumbled into the foyer, wide-eyed, scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. I watched as their curiosity grew, their feet carrying them through the hallways, unknowingly walking deeper into the house's grip. They didn't see me. I didn't want them to see me. But I felt the familiar tug in my chest, the house whispering in my mind, urging me forward. You know what to do. Guide them. Show them the way. I stepped into the hallway. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the weight of those who had come before. The walls seemed to lean in, the creaking floorboards singing their silent song. Every corner, every turn of the house felt like a threat, a warning, but also an invitation. I couldn't fight it anymore. The person turned a corner, unaware that the house had already begun to take hold. I followed them at a distance, silently, waiting for the inevitable. I had learned this, knew it now, like an ancient instinct. The house would always call, always draw in the curious and the desperate. But once it had them, they could never leave. I glanced up at the mirror hanging in the hallway. The reflection was wrong. I saw myself standing there, but I was not quite myself. The face in the glass was cold, hollow, just like the others before me. The reflection smiled, but it wasn't my smile. It was the house's smile. You will guide them. The voice echoed in my mind. Show them the way. Let them understand. I could feel the shift, the change as the first footsteps reached the final door. The one that would lead to the hidden room, the heart of the house. The house's pulse quickened. It was hungry, waiting for them to fall deeper into its grasp. The person reached for the door handle. I wanted to scream, to stop them, but I couldn't. My body had become a vessel for the house's will. It was no longer me in control. I watched as the door creaked open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the hidden room lay in wait, with its flickering, cursed light and its strange, unreadable symbols. The air was thick with the history of the house, the lives it had consumed. And in the center of it all, the chair sat, empty but calling. The book lay open on the floor, its pages still turning on their own, just as they had when I first found the room. I knew they wouldn't be able to resist it. The person took a tentative step inside, their eyes widening as they scanned the room. I felt the familiar surge of power, a force that tugged at my very soul. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't even want to stop it anymore. You are ready, the voice said, now in my ear, so close I could almost feel it breathing on my neck. Now, you are the one who will pull them in. And I did. I moved forward, my hand reaching toward the stranger, gently guiding them toward the chair. I didn't need to say a word. The room was already speaking to them. It was beckoning them, like it had done to me. The book opened wider, its pages flipping faster now. The symbols on the walls flickered, glowing with an unholy light. The person sat down, hypnotized, their eyes glazed over, staring into the book. Their fingers twitched as if trying to turn the pages, but they couldn't. I stood there, watching, feeling an eerie satisfaction. This was the house's will, not mine. I had become a part of its endless, looping story, and now it was my turn to bring another into its fold. The house thrummed with energy. The walls seemed to pulse as though the very fabric of the place was alive. I could feel the presence of the past, those who had been trapped here before me. I could hear their whispers in the air, their voices coming from the walls, from the corners of the room. I took a step back, watching the person's transformation. Their features started to blur, their face stretching, pulling into a grotesque version of itself. I could see it now. The hollow eyes, the twisted smile. They were becoming part of the house just like I had, becoming an extension of the curse, an echo of the souls that had come before. The book closed with a resounding thud, and the room fell into complete silence. The figure, once human, now sat still in the chair, its eyes wide open, but seeing nothing. It was no longer a person. It was a vessel for the house, a part of its eternal cycle. And I knew, with sickening clarity, that the house wasn't just waiting for souls to arrive. It needed them. It craved them. Each soul that was drawn in would add to the house's power, making it stronger, more alive. The house was a predator, and its hunger would never be satisfied. As I turned to leave, the voice spoke again, soothing, familiar. "There will always be more," it whispered, "and you will always be here to guide them. You are part of the story now. Forever." And with that, I stepped into the next room, ready to wait for the next curious soul to cross the threshold, ready to guide them into the darkness where they too would become part of the house. Time had lost meaning here. It was neither day nor night, neither past nor present. The house breathed with an ancient rhythm, one that I could feel pulsing through the very air. Every corner, every crack in the walls seemed to whisper the same words, the same story, over and over again. You are part of it now. I could almost hear the voices of those before me, trapped in the endless loop. I could hear their cries, their desperate pleas to escape. Pleas that were never heard, swallowed by the house before they could even reach the door. But I no longer felt sorry for them. No, I was beyond that now. I was beyond any sense of mercy. The house had claimed me, and I had become its keeper. A strange peace washed over me, like a cold, comfortable numbness. But then, a new feeling began to stir in me. A sense of something different. It wasn't quite fear, but more like unease. The kind of unease you feel when something's just a little off, when the house shifts in a way that you can't quite understand. I turned toward the hall, my eyes scanning the familiar rooms, the endless maze of walls and doorways that had become my prison. But something was different. A door had appeared. It wasn't one I recognized, not from the last time I had walked through these corridors. It was there, suddenly, in the middle of the hallway where there had been nothing before. The wood was dark and polished, as though it had been there for centuries and yet somehow new at the same time. It beckoned me, compelled me, pulling me toward it. I had no choice but to approach. The closer I got, the more I felt that gnawing sensation of wrongness, something deep within the house stirring, unsettled. A presence, cold and ancient, seemed to pulse from beyond that door. I could hear whispers, faint at first, but growing louder with each step. These voices were different. They were not the ones I had come to know over the years. They were new. The door creaked open of its own accord, the dark wood groaning as if it had been waiting for this moment. My heart raced as I stepped inside. The room was unlike any I had ever seen in the house. It wasn't a part of the twisted, decaying labyrinth I had grown accustomed to. This room was pristine, clean. In fact, it was too clean. There was no dust, no grime, no age to it. It looked perfect, like something out of a dream. But the strangest part? The walls were covered with portraits. Each one was painted in exquisite detail, capturing faces frozen in time. But they weren't like the typical portraits. These faces were familiar. They were the faces of people I had seen over the years. Newcomers, souls who had wandered in, lost to the house. They were my responsibility now, a part of my endless task. Except, these faces were different. They were smiling. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. I had never seen anyone smile in the house before. The spirits here were always twisted, broken, their faces contorted with agony or hollow emptiness. But these people, these portraits, they smiled as though they were at peace, as though they had found a home. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I stepped forward, my footsteps soft on the floor. The air in the room was unnaturally still, as though everything in here was waiting, holding its breath. The portraits were watching me. But it wasn't just the portraits that had changed. It was the house. I turned to the far corner of the room, and there it was. Another figure. A person standing in the shadows. The room had been so still, so quiet, that I hadn't heard their approach. "You came." The voice was low, familiar, but older, wiser, different. I froze. The voice sent a wave of dread through me, not because I didn't recognize it, but because I did. It was mine. "What is this place?" I asked, my own voice distant, as if it were someone else speaking. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a face I hadn't seen in so long. It was me, but not the version of me that had become part of the house, the hollow, cursed version. This version was whole. It was alive. It was the version of me that existed before the house claimed me, before the curse. I took a step back. "How is this possible?" The figure smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "You think you are the first? That you are the only one who has ever crossed over to this side?" I shook my head. No, this can't be happening. I've been here too long. I'm part of it now. There's no going back." "Oh, but you are wrong," the figure replied, their voice calm, almost gentle. "You've always been part of it. But you've also been part of something else. You've just forgotten. All of us who have been claimed by the house, we were once like you. And some of us find a way to return." I stared at them, confusion and terror flooding my mind. "Return? What do you mean?" The figure's smile widened as though they were waiting for me to understand, waiting for the truth to dawn. They stepped closer, their eyes now gleaming with a knowledge I couldn't comprehend. "There is a way out. There always has been." A shiver of realization slowly crept up my spine. The house wasn't just a prison. It was a choice. I stepped back, my hands trembling. No, this isn't right. I can't." But it was too late. The room began to shift, the walls warping, the faces in the portraits now twisting, no longer smiling, their eyes darkening. The ground beneath me trembled, and I could feel the pulse of the house deep in my bones. The figure was gone in an instant, leaving only the cold, hollow air. The walls around me began to pulse in time with the house's heartbeat, and I could hear the whispers rising again, louder, more frantic this time. "You know the truth now," the voice echoed. "You can leave if you choose, but know this, you cannot escape the house's hunger." I didn't have a choice. The door behind me had closed, and I knew, deep down, that no matter what path I chose, the house would always be waiting. I stood frozen in the center of the room, the pulse of the house thundering in my chest. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. I could hear the whispers, their voices growing louder, more desperate, each one tugging at the edges of my mind. The portraits watched me, their eyes now filled with something new, judgment. I could feel it, the choice. It hung there, suspended in the air like a weight too heavy to bear. "You know what you must do," the voice echoed again, its tone shifting, somehow colder, darker. "But the price is always the same." I glanced around the room. The figure was gone, leaving only the lingering sense of its presence. I could feel it. The part of me that had been left behind, buried deep inside the house. It called to me, coaxing, beckoning me to choose. But I wasn't sure anymore. What if leaving wasn't an escape at all? What if returning to the world outside meant becoming just another shadow, another ghost lost in the house's endless hunger? I didn't want to become that. Yet, something whispered deep inside me. A dark thought, a fleeting image of freedom. What if I could break the cycle? I took a hesitant step toward the door, my fingers trembling as I reached for the handle. My heart raced, my mind clouded with uncertainty. Was this truly the way out? Or was this just another part of the house's twisted game? The moment my hand touched the handle, the air shifted. A strange sound. A click echoed through the room and the door swung open. I couldn't breathe. Beyond the door lay a corridor I didn't recognize, stretching infinitely into darkness. No light, no sound, only a never-ending expanse of emptiness. And there, at the end of the corridor, I saw a figure. A shadow, its outline indistinct, yet familiar in some way. It stood motionless as though waiting for me, waiting for my decision. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind raced, trying to understand. Who was it? Why did it feel like it had been there all along? A part of me that I had been avoiding. The whisper came again, this time softer, more insistent. You've always known the way. I stepped forward, my feet carrying me against my will. With each step, the darkness seemed to press in tighter, the air colder. The figure remained motionless, its face obscured by shadows. I reached out, stretching my hand toward it, and then everything went still. Time stopped. The whispers faded. The walls, the door, the very ground beneath me seemed to disappear. And for a moment, there was nothing, only darkness. And then I woke up. I blinked confused as I sat up in bed. The room around me was normal, quiet, calm. No shadows, no whispers, no portraits. Was it a dream? I looked around the room. The air felt different now, light, as though something had shifted, but I couldn't tell what. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the faintest hint of unease tugged at my mind, as if I had forgotten something. I reached for the lamp beside my bed, my hands still shaking. I turned it on, the soft light filling the room. But then, as I glanced at the reflection in the mirror, something caught my eye. There, in the corner of the room, just behind the door, I saw a figure standing in the shadows. It wasn't me, and it wasn't gone. The door creaked. The whispers began again. The house was waiting, and I had never truly left.